where every shadow hides a story, and every story drags you deeper into the dark. Stay until the end to hear the darkest tale of all, because here in the dark room there's always something hiding in the corner of your eye. Something that makes you question what you see when no one is watching. Here is the story of the Labubu Doll. It began like any other day would, except this day, the family's dog was missing. They looked everywhere, but Bruno was gone. There were scratches and tufts of fur found near Lily's room door, but nobody said anything about it. It wasn't unusual for her to take her anger out on the dog. She was a difficult child, that's for sure. Later that night, a new sound invaded the house, a foul, rotting smell. It seeped through the cracks in the floorboards, through the gaps in the window frames, oozing its way into every room. John and Mary were concerned. Their home was spotless. It had to be coming from somewhere else. They couldn't place it, but they knew they needed to find the source fast. The following morning, the stench had spread to the rest of the house, saturating their clothes, their sheets, even their thoughts. Dark stains were seeping through the wallpaper, as if something was trying to bleed its way through from the other side. And it wasn't just the smell. Something was in the house with them, breathing, growing stronger by the minute. Lily was pale and weak. She had refused to eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner for the past 3 days, subsisting instead on water and something she called Labubu. They had no idea what that was. Her parents begged her to eat, demanding she explain what was going on, but she wouldn't say a word. Her eyes were blank, staring off into space, as if she was seeing something only she could see. John and Mary went back and forth between checking on their sick child and trying to find the source of the stench, tearing apart the house, looking behind pictures on the wall, lifting up floorboards, even checking inside the chimney. But they found nothing. The smell seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The house was big, old, and drafty. It made sense that the odor would linger, but this wasn't just an unpleasant smell. This reeked of death. As the days passed, the smell grew stronger and Lily got worse. She was still drinking water, but now she had begun chewing on her sheets, gnawing at them as if they were the tastiest morsel of food. Her skin grew sallow. She lost all of her hair. The happy laughter that used to echo through the halls was replaced by the sound of nails on a chalkboard, or so it seemed. Now it was only silence. And then one night, after the kids were asleep, John and Mary heard a sound that made their blood run cold. They were listening on the baby monitor as they always did. They couldn't sleep without it. Sometimes Lily would wake up crying, and they wanted to be able to comfort her right away. But this wasn't crying. It was a different sound. It was their daughter talking. At first they thought they were just misinterpreting the sound she was making. Babies don't talk. That's just a fact. So they kept listening, hoping it would go away. But it didn't. Lily was talking in a different voice. It was deeper than hers and distorted, like speaking through a megaphone. "I am Labubu," she said. "I am hungry." And then she laughed, a sound that echoed unnaturally in the darkness, a sound that should have never come from their sweet little girl. The next morning, John and Mary rushed to Lily's room, throwing open the curtains, desperate to get some sunlight into the room. Maybe whatever was happening to their daughter would leave her if they could just get some light in here. Instead, they found claw marks, large, unnatural claw marks that tore down the length of the bed frame. Too deep to have been made by a child, too precise to have been made by an animal. What kind of monster had been in here? Was that what was causing all this? Had Lily been attacked? But how? Who would do such a thing? They cleaned Lily up, changed her sheets, and tried to make her feel better, but it was no use. She was still pale and weak and wouldn't eat. All she drank was water, and whenever she was left alone, they could hear her talking to herself, whispering about how Labubu was coming soon. He was almost here. And each time they checked, the claw marks grew larger, deeper, and as they stared at them, trying to make sense of it all, they noticed something else, a crack in the corner of the room. And as they watched, horrified, the crack grew wider. It stretched across the room, inching closer and closer to them, tendrils of darkness reaching out to grab them. Mary screamed, pulling John toward her, both of them frozen in terror as the shadows took shape before their eyes. From the darkness, 2 glowing red eyes appeared, followed by more and more until the entire room was nothing but screaming faces. The air grew thick and heavy, as if the walls themselves were pressing in on them, trying to crush them. The faces continued to scream and grow until the room exploded into light and sound. John and Mary shielded their eyes, the camera falling from John's numb fingers as he cried out in pain. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw it. In the corner of the room stood an antique doll. Her porcelain face was stained and scratched. One eye was milky white, the other glowed a terrifying red. She wore a dress once white, now matted with dirt and blood. And her smile, oh God, her smile was wide and sharp and full of teeth. It was the same smile that had been on all the faces in the darkness. Then she moved. She turned her head, the red eye flashing, and pointed a finger at John and Mary. And that's when they knew. This was the source of the smell, the reason Lily was sick. This doll was the reason their house had become a prison. She was the embodiment of the darkness that had grown in their home, feeding off their fear, growing stronger by the minute. And now she was here. They ran, stumbling through the house, desperately searching for an escape. But it was too late. As they turned the corner, they heard a familiar sound. It was Lily's voice, but it wasn't her. It was Labubu. "I am Labubu," she said, and the doll's laughter echoed through the halls. "And you will die." John and Mary fell to their knees, defeated. The doll approached slowly, a red eye boring into them. She was tall, much taller than they had expected, and her arms were long and twisted. The fingers on one hand were tipped like claws, while the other hand had no fingers at all, just a bloody stump where they should have been. As she loomed over them, the doll reached out and touched John's face with a cold, dead finger. "You brought me here," she whispered, her voice raspy and thin. "You summoned me with your fear. Now you will suffer forever." And then she struck, sinking her sharp teeth into John's neck. He screamed, thrashing around wildly, but it was no use. The doll was strong and relentless, and as she drained him of his life force, he knew they should have listened to the scratching at the door. They should have paid attention to the whispers in the night. If they had, maybe they would still be alive. But they weren't. The doll fed until John was nothing but skin and bone, then moved on to Mary. And as she drank in her life essence, Mary looked back at her daughter, who sat in the corner rocking back and forth, chanting over and over, "Labubu, Labubu, Labubu." That's one story from the dark room. Are you brave enough to stay until the end? Because we have one final tale to tell. A story about the origins of this doll. A story about how John and Mary brought Labubu into their lives and unleashed hell itself upon their home. The doll had been passed down in Mary's family for generations. It started with her great-great-grandmother, who received it from a traveling salesman who claimed the doll was possessed by a benevolent spirit that could grant wishes. All you had to do was whisper your desire into its ear, and it would come true. But the doll also came with a warning. It must never be removed from the house, lest the darkness within it consume everything. But the woman ignored the warning and took the doll with her when she traveled. The moment she stepped outside, though, the skies turned black. Rain poured from the clouds and the earth rumbled and shook. She turned back toward home, but it was too late. The doll had already begun to feed on her fear, growing stronger by the second. Over the years, the doll passed from mother to daughter, each receiving it with joy, unaware of the danger that lay dormant within. Each had their wishes granted, each had their fears consumed. Eventually, it came to rest in Mary's arms, and though she didn't know the history behind it, something inside her told her to hide it, to keep it away from prying eyes and curious hands. She placed it in the nursery, hoping that the safety of her home would keep the doll's power at bay. But she was wrong, for when Lily was born, Mary's mother gifted her the doll, unaware of the chaos that would soon follow. Now you know the whole story. Now you understand why John and Mary were cursed. But here's the secret truth. The doll isn't the main story. The doll is just a vessel, a means to bring evil into your life. The real story is in here, hidden in the shadows, waiting for you to turn the lights off and listen closely. Can you hear it? Ends here. But remember, the darkness never sleeps. And if you've been listening closely, perhaps you might just hear the whispered echoes of this tale in your own nightmares. For tonight, we say goodbye. But if you dare, return to Tales from the Dark Room, where every shadow hides a secret,